session follows a lead that came up in a kind of a quick survey that went out among business managers on topics of interest and things that might be of value to you as business managers and superintendents that are here and others. And it had to do with, obviously, the importance of building good relationships, but in this case specifically about building relationships that lead towards good data and waiver match. And as most of you know, the waiver match line item is now the biggest line, far exceeds personnel costs and things like that within a county budget. So it's important that we get it right. And part of getting it right is making sure that the right hand knows what the left hand is doing, and the left hand knows what the right hand is doing. And in this case, the major players are business managers and SSA directors. And so in this session, we're going to bring those two perspectives together and highlight the importance of having joint discussions in navigating this really touchy area of efficient and effective waiver planning. Sharing their strategies and experience with us are Christy Bugher, Business Services Director with the Darke County Board of DD, and Joseph Badell, Community Services Director with the Darke County Board of DD. So please join me with a warm welcome for both Christy and Joseph.
All right, thank you. I'm first going to let Joseph introduce himself and a little bit about his department and what he oversees.
Morning, everybody. And I just want to say first, a friend of mine, Karen Crabb, reminded me that we are standing between you and lunch, so I apologize. If we start to see Karen start to move, I'm going to follow her. So, again, just like John said, my name is Joseph Badell. And first of all, can you hear me okay? Okay, good. Community Services Director. So glorified name for SSA Director, right? So just taking a look at that. Within the SSA Director position, the Community Services position, we kind of oversee a little bit of everything. SSA world, housing, MUI. I think the SSA directors in the room know exactly what that means, right? Business directors as well. I supervise 8 SSAs, adult SSAs, and 3 children's SSAs. So, you know, we're on the small to, I think they say we're a small, medium-sized county. So, thank you.
All right, and we also have 1 SSA manager. So I'm Christy Bugher, fancy title, Business Services Director. What that means is I'm the business manager, HR, facilities, you know. So I kind of want to get a temperature for the room first. Where are my business people? Okay, where are my SSA world people? Right on. Any Medicaid managers? Okay, and then superintendents. Okay, all right, we got a little of everybody. One more question. Where are our small county boards? Okay, how many would classify themselves as medium-sized? Okay, and where are you large boards? Okay, all right, so clearly we are on the smaller size, and so we're just hoping some of these tools and tricks that we have established, that maybe you can glean something from that and take it back and put it into place. So Joseph, I'm going to let you talk a little bit more about, our size and who we are. Good.
So, like she said, small county boards, I think you'll understand this a little bit. Big county boards, this might be, you know, you can't really look at this and see this as intimidating or what have you. But we have about 193 adult people on SSA caseloads, 172 and 156 for total waivers. And I'm sorry, those are waiver numbers, not so much people being served. So we are small to medium. We have seen a lot of growth though. Typically our growth doesn't seem to be growing in numbers. It's seen as growing in services and the needs of people. We've seen dramatic costs increase as well, and not the waiver numbers.
Yeah. So, yeah, 156 waivers. I'm sure there's a few of you in here like, oh, that's cute. But you know, when you're a smaller a board, you know, that is significant, and making sure that, because with a smaller board, that also means there's a smaller staff. So 11 total SSAs versus hundreds, you know. So our total waiver authorizations as of March 31st was a little over 11 million. And so we have seen that as about a $1.1 million increase over where we were last year. And again, so those are, just multiply that number out depending on the size. So we want to make sure, you know, to John's point, that we're predicting those things accurately. So I'm going to let Joseph talk just a little bit more about the history of where this collaboration between the departments came from and why it's so important.
Right. I think just to understand a little bit of our county board history, you have to understand a little bit about the history of people that we're serving. You know, I think our mindsets are changing just a little bit. Families are changing. What they want out of services are changing. You know, the days when we used to serve people and they would say, you know, I've got it. Don't worry about it. We'll call you if we need you, are kind of over. You know, I'm reminded of a family member of a gentleman, and I remember meeting at his house, and it was an evening. It was kind of a rainy night. I don't know why these things kind of stick in my mind, probably because it was such a dramatic point in my career. And it was probably 15, 20 years ago when it all happened. It was a gentleman. He was about 87 years old. He had fallen while taking his daughter out to the bus to go to the workshop. He broke his hip, and that's when they called us and said, hey, we need some help. We were, you know, I went out to the house. I was meeting with family. I was meeting with their brothers and sisters. And I was like, why has it taken so long for you to come to us and say, we need help? And he looked at me and said, she's my daughter. And that was his only answer. So the idea of caring for people just because they're yours, just because you feel that's your responsibility, has kind of gone by the wayside. It's still there, don't get me wrong. We all feel that way about our loved ones, but it's kind of gone by the wayside. It's been replaced with, hey, what am I eligible for? What can you give me, county board? You know, not that it costs millions of dollars to do these types of things, but what can I get out of it? That's not always the case, but that seems to be the case a lot of times that we run into it. I think we see that a little bit more now with, you know, parents as paid providers and different things of that nature. So how are we making sure we keep this all in focus? And that, again, is just good communication between all of us that are involved. You know, SSAs and the Community Services Department in our county can get kind of locked up in what we do. We're running around, we're doing our services, we don't think about other people, even though our job is to think about other people, right? So how did we, about 10 years ago, we said, okay, there's too many things going on. The one hand doesn't know what the other hand is doing, right? So how do we make that work? We came together and we said, okay, we call it our ARC committee, not to be confused with, you know, the agency, but the Administrative Review Committee. It was made up of administrators. At the time, it was the Community Services Director, the Business Manager, and the Community First Director, just to sit down and make sure we were talking about what was going on. Why are the costs going up? Because the business manager, who's now our superintendent, Tanya Clark, sorry, old name, she, even though she and I had a great relationship at the time, she only saw cost increases. And she was like, what the heck is going on? You know, hundreds of thousands of dollars are going up and out the door, and she doesn't even know what it's about. So our superintendent at the time said, let's create a group and let's get together and start talking about these things. So that's, you know, a little bit of the history there. SSA duties have changed a lot, so it doesn't give them a lot of time to come together and meet with business people. You know, we now have a business manager, a business director, a Medicaid manager, and an SSA manager. Before it was just administrators, directors at that time trying to do it all. So now we have those positions. They are our ARC committee. So it's the business services director, myself, the Medicaid manager, and the SSA manager come together to discuss needs, because that's where it really is. We decided it's not about what people want, it's about what people need and how we communicate that amongst ourselves. SSAs in the past did everything. You know, they did CPTs, they did PAWs, they did case management, they did MUIs, it goes on and on and on. The business people, we're doing everything in the business world, you know, and I can't elaborate on that because that's just like one or two things, I think.
Yep,
right?
that's it.
Yeah. But as a colleague of mine stated yesterday in the conference, the goalpost keeps moving. It's not that we learn how to do one thing and do it really, really well. We have to learn to do everything, and it just keeps moving. And that is not specific to the SSA department or the SSA world. That's county boards in general, right? Everybody picks up a different ball or wears a different hat. So I guess we went through that. I'm trying to think. My other notes, I don't want to make sure I miss anything. We've been doing this for about 10 years. And I think we have developed a system that is a little bit better. It's evolved throughout the years. It is more about communication than it is anything else, you know, again. So Christy knows what my department's doing, and I know what Christy's department is doing, so.
Okay. All right, so we are just going to share some of the tools that the two departments use for that waiver planning piece. For you business managers in the room, after lunch, we're going to hear from Neil and Clay on you know, those accuracy and accountability of those numbers. Our session is more about those conversations, like Joseph was talking about, between the two departments and how we make sure that, yeah, the right hand knows what the left hand is doing. So the tools that I have listed up here that have asterisks, those are all available on Member Connect. You can go out and take a look at those. I'm not pulling all of those up today, but we will go through them. So the tools that we really use when we are looking at waiver, we have a waiver projection sheet, and we plan out. We try to look at, you know, the next 5 to 10 years. The communication piece between the departments, again, that administrative review committee, and then lastly, we have a waiver costs spreadsheet that we use as well. So let's talk a little bit about waiver projections. As all of you know, this is, you know, waiver projections are not foolproof. You know, this is simply what we think is going to happen based on what we currently know. Things are fluid. You know, there's always going to be transfers in, transfers out. There's going to be new enrollees that you didn't know about. There's going to be those sudden and unplanned changes in need, like a caregiver has broken a hip and now they need somebody to come in and help. There's emergencies that come up, and again, to Joseph's point, we are now seeing as parents as paid providers. These are all things that, you know, we can't possibly. I joke all the time about my crystal ball must be broken because I can't seem to figure out how many people are actually coming in, how many are actually going out, and those new people that we're going to be seeing. So again, this tool that we use is just what we think is going to happen based on what we know today. So a lot of the folks that are on this list, maybe it's your high school students that are getting ready to graduate, and we're seeing more and more of them want to live independently. We're seeing more and more of them want to trial work before they actually head out into the workforce. And so those types of conversations start to happen. My Medicaid manager, he does report to me. He hangs out in the SSA world, obviously. His office is in the same hallway with our SSA so that they have quick access to him. But you know, he has a very financial role, and so he does report to the business office. He updates this list on input from the SSA manager, who gets input from the SSAs. This particular list, as a business manager, I take a look at it usually twice a year. In the spring, when cost projections are due to DODD, and then I will revisit the list late summer or early fall when I am preparing my allocation budget for the county, unless it is something that we have to look at as part of our ARC review process. So communication, and this is, AKA meetings. I will say this looks like a lot, but we are not in the habit of meeting just to meet. So yes, we have all of these meetings on the calendar. I'm gonna let Joseph go through them because most of them are community service based, but some of them may end up being 5 minutes. If we don't have anything to talk about, we don't have anything to talk about. Sometimes they go a little longer depending on the scope of what's going on. So I'll let Joseph talk about some of that.
I guess communication really doesn't start with meetings. It starts with just, your interactions with people. It starts with SSAs walking down the hall, being able to see somebody. We have the benefit of being in a smaller county. Our facility is smaller. So we walk down the hall, we see everybody. I go up and down the hall, we see all the administrators. All you got to do is around the corner and you see all the SSAs, if they're in, because we do run flexible schedules, right? So communication starts small. And those small things are what make things big, Those small little touches are what helps everybody understand what's going on. So then we come into the meetings, which are just summaries. Sometimes our administrative team meeting, which is just, the superintendent and the executives come in. We talk about what's going on and how we're going to do it. We talk about the projections and the needs that we see. When it makes me think, and Christy was talking about the projections and her talking about she looks at it maybe twice a year, right? Primarily during the time when it's due to DODD, and that's when I stay out of her area because she's already got her numbers, you just stay clear of that. But SSAs are looking at this on a daily basis. They're always looking at these projections. How are folks going to be served and what do they need to do it? So, of course, in these meetings, that's where we identify needs versus wants, because we all know Medicaid, even though Medicaid can pretty much pay for most things because we're pretty creative in getting those things taken care of. We know that Medicaid is only supposed to pay for needs. It's not supposed to pay for wants. When we talk about vacations and those types of things, vacations are a need to people, because you have to decompress, you have to get away. But is it a need to be doing it all the time? So, I won't go into that kind of thought process. But, administrative team, leadership team, which that's when we draw in our managers, the Medicaid manager, the SSA manager, who add a different spin to everything. We draw in some of our leads, our advocacy, our employment, some of these different areas that kind of give us a better feel of what we're looking at and what we're going to be planning for. Community services director and SSA manager, they meet regularly. We are always trying to figure out, and I say they, that's me and my SSA manager, sorry. We meet at least monthly, but it's always happening. We're having phone calls, emails, texts, face-to-face. Business service director and Medicaid manager, I'll let Christy take care of that, but she and Louie talk, and that's our Medicaid manager, sorry, talk all the time about what they're seeing and how they're seeing it and how's it going to affect us. And then we bring it back together, with the SSA manager and the adult SSAs. They come in, they grab new information that they can take up the chain to maybe that SSA manager, Medicaid manager discussion. And then we have our regular staff meetings where, we do all those. And then community service director and children's SSAs. I've recently gotten back into supervising children's SSAs. Let me tell you what, this is a world, this education world, and helping people through it is a difficult process. I don't know, how many people work with the education or children's SSAs around here? I give you credit because typically in that area, you have the least number of waivers, the most number of mouths, because you got teams that are talking all the time. You got your IEP teams, you got your case management teams, you got everything going on. how you stay up with that, is challenging. So I give you all credit. Thank you for what you do. And then our administrative review committee kind of brings it all back together. That's our ARC meeting, talking about those services that are above 5% or $5,000 in our county, or 10% that are going to be going to the superintendent. So.
Yep. So, and yeah, my meeting with the Medicaid manager, most of that has to do with billing issues. So maybe somebody's out of units because a provider provided more than what their CPT and PAWS allow for. And so, and sometimes, business managers, you're aware of this as well, that they don't always put their billing in a timely manner. And so 5-6 months later, they're needing all these additional units. And so that is a lot of what myself and my Medicaid manager talk about, is whether or not we're going to go back and authorize those, who gave them permission to do that, those types of conversations happen as well.
Christy, just in this, I kind of think, and I go back to our morning meeting with, I'm trying to think of her name.
Jordan.
Zimmerman was her last
Jordan.
name. Jordan. And, it talks about communication. And, what is communication? It's nonverbal, for lack of a better term. And just thinking how essential it is to what we're doing. And these meetings are ways that we do that.
Yep. Yeah. So our administrative review process, how many of you have like a review process in place? Okay. All right. So this is what ours looks like. Now, again, I understand that we are small. However, I think even if you're a medium or large size, if you've got a group of SSAs to report to an SSA manager that maybe has a Medicaid manager, and then they continue to report up, I'm hoping that you might be able to take some of these tips and put some of them into place. So our administrative review process, again, the members include myself as the business services director, our Medicaid manager, the community service SSA director, and then the SSA manager. So yes, there's 4 of us. For some of you, that might look a lot bigger, or maybe it just continues to funnel up until you get to that point. We also invite SSAs in if we need some additional information about a specific request. Our ARC committee every other week, unless there are things that pop up that we need to just talk about immediately if they cannot wait. ARC reviews for us are all individuals that are requesting services that result in an increase of 5% or more than $5,000, as well as all prior authorizations. So that's anything over their funding range. Any emergency services, participant-directed goods, all waiting list assessments are reviewed as part of this meeting. And anything that someone is requesting locally funded dollars to pay for. All of those come before the ARC review committee. What we do is we go through those. There is an example of our ARC review form on Member Connect, so you can go out and look at that and all the information that is requested. And then as the committee, we can request, we can approve it, we can deny it, or we can table it. And sometimes all 3 of those things can happen. As a business manager, I am not intimately involved with the folks that we support. I do get to see them on occasion. Names will become familiar because they're coming before ARC review on a regular basis, or maybe they're in the middle of some sort of emergency or crisis and we're trying to figure some things out. But beyond their names and maybe a Medicaid number, I don't know the ins and outs of these individuals. And so I'm looking at dollars and cents. And sometimes business managers, I'm going to come back to this, that can be a problem for us sometimes because there is a very human aspect to what we do as well. But I don't know their situations. I don't know that their caregiver just got put in the hospital. I don't know those types of details. And so I do ask a lot of questions. And usually either the Medicaid manager, the SSA manager will have some input. If they don't, we'll pull the SSA in, whether that's virtually or so that they can not so much argue their point, but just give us some of that background information that all of us need to be able to make the best decision possible. But again, after hearing from Jordan this morning, I'm even kind of rethinking, I'm like, okay, are we making the best decision possible? But, so why do we have this process? And I'm going to go over the reasons why it is beneficial to me as a business manager, and then I'm going to let Joseph talk a little bit about what the benefits are to SSAs and the SSA department. For me as a business manager, it really does help me keep in mind that little creep number. I think those of us in the business world, we kind of got hit with that a little hard last year. That fifth or supplemental invoice, we weren't really prepared for. And so when we keep in mind that our waiver match is determined at 2 points of time, right? So if there are significant changes in service that happens between those 2 points in time, this allows me to keep that in the back of my mind to make changes to what might be coming as part of that true up, at the end of the year. And it also depends on the time of year that happens. So, we're on a calendar year, DODD is on a fiscal year. So depending on when those meetings happen and those changes happen, it just helps me process, okay, they had a 12% increase in services that I'm not currently paying waiver match on because my authorizations were based on a point in time already passed. So as business managers, that does help us keep that in mind. I'm never caught off guard by a new waiver. I'm aware that it's coming. It may not be something that we projected, but never ever does a waiver come through that I had no idea was coming. I'm well aware in advance, prior to those being allocated, that is happening. I am made aware of disenrollments. This was a big one, I think, for folks. Like, they had no idea that folks had moved, they had disenrolled, they maybe had passed away. These aren't pieces of information that I would know because I'm not intimately, again, involved in the personal details of the folks that we are supporting. And so all of those pieces of information are also brought to my attention through this process. I'm also notified, and business managers, I know if there's a lot of people, you probably don't want to know all of these details, but I'm even made aware, even on a daily basis, of hospitalizations. So if somebody goes into the hospital, and those payment authorizations are paused, while they're in a facility, I'm well aware of those as well. When they went in, when they're coming back out, so that we can start billing again. So those are the types of details that the SSA department shares with the business office. I'm made aware of transfers in and transfers out. If we know, if the SSA department knows they're coming, I know they're coming. And so making sure that those go into updating my projections as well. And then I also have the ability to offer some input or suggestions when people are requesting service. So my background may be a little bit different than some of the other business managers in the room. I came from private nonprofit, and so I am very aware of the resources that are available in our community, things for like food, like where to get things paid for. And so I may offer up another suggestion as opposed to going straight to the waiver or local funds, because I know this organization, that's what they do. So let's hook that family up with them. So if you're somebody that maybe is not familiar with all of the resources that are available in your communities, maybe reach out to, your JFS probably is intimately aware of those, but maybe your local United Way or something like that, that you can kind of have that list in the back of your head. Not that we don't want to pay for things, but if there's somebody else already doing it, we allow them to do that. So that's some benefits to my office, and I'll let Joseph talk about benefits to his department.
I think, when I think of relationships and communication, and Christy mentions JFS, again, we're a small county, so I regularly meet with JFF representatives, Children's Services, ICFs, all of those things on the regular. I think when we talk about the information that Christy knows, some people think, well, how do you have the time to continually update the business services director about those things? To be truly honest, that makes our meetings go, that was discussed, a lot faster. Everything's a little bit more efficient, because then there's no questions, because she's aware of what's going on. The Medicaid manager is aware of what's going on. So we just pull it together, and it makes it more efficient for the people we serve, because we're not doing the red tape type of thing. But benefits of this ARC process And of course, the first one is probably, if you're an SSA, you can understand this. How many times you're put on the spot? You're thinking this is a great service, but then you get back and you talk to your boss and they say, I don't think we're going to do that. We can do this some other way. There are benefits for the SSA to say, I'm not the one making this decision. I know these are the options, but this is not one of those options, right? So the no is not always an SSA, and that helps. Now, they are the communicators. They go out and they meet with folks. So they do have to say no a lot, or maybe bear the burden of bad news. But awareness of costs associated with authorizations. I'm not saying this happens in every county, but in my county, some SSAs don't really understand the cost limitations or authorizations. They just know the needs, right? And they know it costs money. So when we have these conversations and we draw SSA input into them, they are aware of what services cost. So it's not just a unit of HPC, it's $100,000 that's going to increase, right? For this service we have to add. Do we have to add a staff person? It's $50,000, $100,000 to add a staff person. So, and that's on the cheap end. SSAs don't always see that, so it draws them into that. And so that helps out a lot. Utilization versus awareness. Let's see, exploring community resources, other resources such as technology. So again, it's a needs versus wants. How do you fill the need? We always work on filling the need at the lowest level. It's kind of like the chain of command. You address it at the lowest level and work your way up. Medicaid's the up, right? So we're looking at technology. We all know we have to rule it out before we add HPC services, but this is something that is very special to us. We have a person that has a love for tech. So we go to her a lot so she can draw it in and say, well, this could be an option. This could be an option. Have you checked on this? So it spurs those conversations. And it does help, maintain a person's independence, because we talked about it. And I remember when remote sports really first started coming into the world, what's the most restrictive? Is it more restrictive to have people in the home with the person, or is it more restrictive to have a monitoring device in the home where the person can ask for help when they actually need it? I think the answer to that. And so that makes everybody think about independence of the person first, and the ability to communicate to an individual the importance of living within his or her budget. I think that one is oftentimes forgotten. People need to know what their services cost. They need to know what their services are and how changes affects them. Because the long and the short is, without people to serve, we wouldn't be doing our jobs. And we have so many different layers, right? And the bigger you are, the more layers you have. But it really comes down to one focal point, and that's the person. So how do they know what their services cost, what they are, and what that does to maybe a county sometimes?
Yeah, and I'm just going to touch on a couple of quick things. At Business Manager Conference, I think it was this past summer, this whole concept kind of came up because there were business managers talking about maybe their SSA department, if their funding range is $30,000 to $75,000, they're going to authorize $75,000 worth of services. Well, because why do we want to keep coming back and reviewing this and reviewing this and reviewing this? And I understand that can be cumbersome. I don't have to do all of that paperwork, but I understand that for an SSA, that review process can be cumbersome. But what ends up happening is you're paying waiver match on that $75,000 authorization, and maybe their utilization and their actual reimbursements are only closer to $30,000. And so it's kind of, when we talk to SSAs, they're like, I don't understand numbers. And I'm like, okay, let's look at it like this. Okay, you have taxes taken out of your paycheck that go to the government. And then every year you have to do your taxes and then they'll send it back. I said, it's kind of similar to that. We don't want, and unfortunately though, our process is usually 18 months to 2 years later we get that money back. So we try to explain to them, we absolutely want people to have what they need. And you know, I know it sounds like we are always like, nope, they can't have it, they can't have it, they can't have it, littlest amount possible. But at the same time, I'm also utilizing taxpayer dollars. And so, you know, I want to be very cognizant and a good steward of those as well. I would love to go on vacation every year. I may not be able to afford it. So if that's something that they identify in their ISP and their planning session and it can be worked into their budget, the answer is yes. Well, because everybody needs a break. We get that. I'm already in a prior auth situation and now I want to go on a cruise. Well, maybe not this year. So we have to weigh those out because again, you are utilizing taxpayer dollars for that. And so it does allow us to really have some of those conversations with the SSAs to understand the concept of authorization, utilization, and then the actual reimbursement piece at the end.
Christy.
Yeah.
And as just to kind of touch a little bit more on that is, you know, again, that's one of our relationships, one of our communication pieces where we, or I should say we, the SSAs and the Medicaid manager get the opportunity to speak to each other. So like she said, he's in their department because that's where his job lives, is authorizing Medicaid services. So when they're planning for their ISPs and their budgets and their, you know, all that, they come to the Medicaid manager and they say, hey, what's the utilization for last year? So if somebody had it authorized that they needed, you know, 100 hours of HPC services, but they only utilized 40, we're probably going to have a conversation about what's really needed, right? Needs versus wants.
Yep. And then the other thing I think sometimes our SSAs see and then utilize the SSA manager or the SSA director is maybe the individual has a different idea of what they want their life to look like than maybe their guardian or their payee or and so sometimes somebody does want remote supports overnight and not have somebody in their house while they're sleeping, but maybe a parent's like, I don't want, you know, somebody watching you. Well, somebody's watching you anyway. Would you rather they be in your house or, and so sometimes the individual can share that with the SSA can then share that, and then if ARC says no, the SSA is not the bad person there, and we can help troubleshoot some of that. So it does allow us to, employ those technology solutions and helps people be as independent as they would like. So that's our ARC review process. And then some of the other things, so I have a waiver cost spreadsheet, and again, my Medicaid manager updates this. I'm not in the weeds of this, but what this does is shows me, and again, I know 156 waivers, that's cute. Every single waiver is listed out. Every individual, all of the IOs, then all of my level ones, my state funded, they're all there. And then what we capture on that is changes. So our ARC review process, again, 5% or $5,000. Well, what about if I have 50 people that have a 2 to 3% increase that didn't come through an ARC review? How do I know about that creep? And so what this waiver cost sheet does is it shows me those ups and downs. And so I do review this one. Because again, ARC only sheds light on those bigger shifts. The waiver cost spreadsheet lets me see those small incremental changes, and it helps us look at, every couple of months, we're seeing a slight, maybe they've not topped out their budget, maybe it's not these dramatic, 5% increases, but we're seeing these revisions, and okay, so what's going on with that individual? And then maybe if they're on a level 1, now we're starting to think, are they gonna be bumping to an IO soon? And so it just allows us to look at what is going on that individual level. Again, my Medicaid manager updates this once a CPT comes through and he does the pause authorization, so he is the one that is in there updating these. But it really does help me better predict, that true up and what our actual authorizations and Medicaid match responsibility is going to be. Let's see. Hey, we're doing good. Some final thoughts, and if you guys know Joseph, he always has final thoughts. No, I just wanted to give a couple of examples of, where we've seen this work well. So communication between the two offices is vital. Whatever that looks like, schedule, if you are a business manager, make sure you are meeting with your SSA director, because you're really gonna get some information that you didn't have before, and things, do I still get caught off guard? Yes. I'm like, wait a minute, what happened? And, or I think there was a hallway conversation I overheard that maybe somebody was coming out of a DC. I'm, a minute, what? Like, that's stuff I need to know. And so, again, we're small enough that I can overhear the conversation in the hallway. But yeah, the communication is vital. And again, it comes back to need-based. What is the best way to meet the need of the individual? Is there a community resource that can pay for that? Do we look at a supported living option? Do we look at shared living options? Do we use local funds? Is it time for a waiver? We can have all of those conversations. And so one of the things that comes to mind that came through, I don't know, maybe a couple of weeks ago, and this is why having a COG is great too, because John helped me with this from WestCon. But we had an individual who is, she is blind, and she was struggling with cooking. The knobs are on the back, and so she's reaching across hot things, she's getting burnt, maybe not setting the correct temperature on the stove, not setting the correct time, because not many stoves are. And so it really just was not working for her. But she wasn't in a position yet where she wanted somebody to come into her home. She's married, they're having a baby, she wanted to be the one doing those things. And she wanted a Wi-Fi enabled stove with knobs on the front. Would a waiver pay for that? Sure. Would a waiver allow an HPC provider to come in and help her do those things? Yes, but that's not what she wanted. The need was she needs to be able to cook safely without hurting herself or burning down their apartment, and she wanted to do it as independently as possible. And so we had a lot, I mean, we talked about it for a good while. And it was only a $600 stove, but we talked about it for a good while. But we decided local funds were the best option for her right now. Will she need a waiver down the line? Maybe. But for right now, we were able to meet the need with $600, and she, I think, is really loving her new stove. So, I mean, do you have some examples that you would like to?
I have so many examples in my head that I can't pull them out because she kind of caught me off guard. I didn't have that one there. But, you know, what it really is it's all about independence. And in that example that she gave, lady just needed $600, right? She didn't need 24/7. She didn't need somebody coming in 3 times a day, 7 days a week to help her prepare meals. She already knew what she was doing. She wanted to take care of her child. She wanted to take care of her husband. She just needed help with a piece of equipment. And, you know, we talk about all those, self-directed goods and services and all that. It could have been a waiver, but it cost us $600 versus enrolling somebody on a waiver for the rest of her life and having to project those costs for the rest of her life, right? So simple is better, more often than not. And I guess, you know, Christy said, you know, I always have final thoughts. I think in this one, my only final thought is those that know me know that I am not a spreadsheet person. Okay, I was talking with my superintendent. I said my job right now seems to be a little bit like throwing spaghetti on the wall. Whatever hits and sticks is what I'm working on. You know, everything else is there. It's always going to be there, but you're always running from one fire to the next. This process helps SSAs put out that fire as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And why is it? Because we talk, you know? They bring it up. They aren't looked at strange if they go to Christy and say, hey, what do you think about this? You know, we don't want that. Even though I'm kind of rigid about chain of command, you know, and my staff, I want to know what's going on before it goes to somebody else. But it's still a fact that communication is key. Needs are the most important versus wants, right? And so I guess that's what we focus on with ARC and the Administrative Review Committee is needs versus wants. And then also, you know, the thing that we all look about is we utilize taxpayer dollars. We have to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars, right? And in a small community, I don't know how it is in a large one because I can't get around the block here, let alone, you know, navigate. So in Greenville or in Darke County, I know that I might walk down the street and run into a taxpayer and they say, what the bleep are you thinking? You know, and I have to come up with an answer. Maybe it's not the best answer in the world, but I have to be able to answer, do this, and the process that we use ensures that we're only spending your money, because it's not my money, it's our money, because everything we spend is taxpayer dollars. I only spend it when needed, not when people want, because that's the world we live in. And just talk to me about I have 5 children, okay? And one of them just got married and has a daughter. And the thought process on money spending is a lot different than mine. So he gets what he wants when he wants it. Me, I just wait, I put it in the cart, I take it out, I put it back in the cart, I take it out. That's my process. This helps me go through that process just like I would at home. So if I have to take anything away from this, and I would hope you would take anything away, is there's really 3 pieces. Relationships. This helps build relationships because we're always talking. Improves communication. And then it just makes things more efficient. And that's what we're all about, so we can take care of people.
Yep. And so business managers, administrators, I guess the challenge for us sometimes is we do live in spreadsheets and we do live in numbers, and sometimes I can be so focused on the numbers that I forget these are people's lives. And so as business managers, we also have to be willing to step out of that, numbers and spreadsheets and see the human side of what is happening in the SSA department. So that being able to have some of those conversations, hearing some of those stories, it makes what we do very real. It's not just numbers and cents. We are literally, and again, I kept hearing this morning with Jordan, we don't always know best, and so we need to be listening to our families and I do give some pushback, but actually Joseph is more of the no person than me, but I'm an empath. But and our tagline at Darke DD is helping people live their best lives. And when the 2 departments are talking and communicating well, that is what we are doing. We are being good stewards of the dollars that have been entrusted to us, but we're helping the individuals that we have the privilege of serving live their best lives. And so I want to I'm going to end with one example of how I see this process really working well. So business managers, you know that we got our, I forget which fiscal year it was, but we got our waiver match reconciliation. Every year, we budget that we're going to get probably around $100,000 back. This year, it was $25,000, which tells me that we are doing it right, that our SSAs are authorizing needs. We're doing those reviews when needs are increasing, and we're keeping a good tab on that. And it was funny because the SSAs are like, great, we can all get raises. No, I had budgeted $100,000 in revenue and I got $25,000 in revenue. We're behind the 8 ball, but good job. And we did praise that because, really, you're not. In theory, we would like to keep that money on the front end and not get it back on the back end. And so, when that came out that they were hitting those marks and that reconciliation was only $25,000, I immediately, told Joseph and Angie, our SSA manager, that this was fantastic, and it was, and then they passed that down the line too. And so it can work, it does work. What that looks like if you're a medium or large size, I'm not sure, but hopefully you gleaned something that you can go back and put to use. So I'm a little scared about this, but questions? Does anybody have questions?
We have a few minutes for questions. While people are thinking about questions, and Devin's been monitoring the audience for questions from the outside,
okay.
None yet. 2 things struck me. Absolutely, this is all to scale, and whether it's Darke County or Summit, where I retired from, the principles or the parts of it, I think, are universal. It's good communication, it's trust, and it's building those relationships where everyone's input is valued, and in this case, everyone's input is really necessary to put good plans together. There's no questions from outside, but yes, we have one, and we just need one to get it started, and we're right on time.
If a vacation is identified as a need, how to use the waiver to meet that need?
Well, it just depends, because a lot of times, let me use my microphone, I can yell that. I think it depends on the situation. I hate to give that "it depends" answer, but I think everybody in the room knows the "it depends" answer. A lot of times, vacation dollars that we see are not additional dollars. The person that's going on vacation is deciding they want to it's just a shift in where they're getting their services. So, it might be we have to add a little bit of mileage so they can get to and from an airport, or they can get to those places. But it's not always necessarily something that we are changing. Now, there have been times that we worked with people that do have, you can see them starting to boil over, okay? And one little break might be it. And really, it's just HPC. It's where are you having it done, right? Is it in your house? Is it in the community? Because the idea is community integration, getting people into their communities, right? And a vacation for me might be different than a vacation for Christy. I might just want to go to Columbus, from Greenville. Somebody wants to go on a cruise. So logistics play a big piece of this, so.
Yeah, to clarify, we don't cover their food, their hotel, their lodging. No, but what it could mean is an increase in non-medical transportation miles and HPC hours, because maybe obviously the individuals, if they have a provider, the provider is going on vacation with them, and maybe they only come into the house 10 hours a week, but now that particular week, it might look more like 40 hours because they're there the whole time. So that's what we're looking at. Yeah, no, we don't pay. The waiver does not pay for vacation. Don't turn me into DODD. We do not pay for cruises and no. Yeah.
Hey, taxpayers, we do not pay for cruises.
We do not. Just maybe, yes, some extra HPC units or non-medical transportation. I think, Amy, do you still have a question? Okay. All right.
Population in Darke County is going to go up if word's out that you pay for
I know. I'm going to
vacation.
see all these transfers in.
Right. Joseph and Christy, thank you.
Thank you.
Great information. Quick reminder, lunch is upstairs. Quick turnaround today. There's about an